Techlandia is recorded at the Central Office on the East Side in Portland. Central Office is a one-stop for all your office or meeting needs. Check them out at centraloffice.com.
Welcome to Techlandia, Tao's regular podcast series. I'm Skip Newberry, President and CEO of Tao. And with us, we have as our guest, Ken Myer with All Tech. Ken, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Skip.
Well, as most of our listeners know, I always start with the same question, which is, I'm always curious, how did people end up in their current role? And so I would like to ask you to spend a few minutes describing a little bit about what you do day to day currently, and then how did you get there?
Okay, well, let's see here. Day to day is a mix. I either am at the university doing some teaching, I focus on leadership and management, or I am working with an early stage tech company, a leader who is new to leading and needs a coach or an advisor. And then I work as a trustee, which we're going to talk about today, on All Tech. My journey, I've lived in the tech industry professionally my whole career. When I was a young man and still had black hair, I worked at IBM, and then I left there and went to smaller and smaller companies and had my own startup, and then actually ran the Washington Technology Industry Association, so the counterpart for TAO in Washington, for about almost 4 years. And then I'm doing this mix that I'm doing now.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I would love to first just hear a little bit about what drew you to teaching. In which
Oh,
university are you affiliated with?
oh, I am teaching at the University of Washington at their business school called the Foster School of Business.
Mhm.
And it's interesting, Skip. It's funny, when I was quite young, I thought about my life, and I thought at some phase of my life, probably the more senior phases, I would love to teach. And so I didn't keep that in my mind's eye, but here I am a number of years later, and I got an opportunity to go in and create a class on tech commercialization. The university was trying to figure out how to take their researchers and their innovations and spin them out, which all universities are trying to do. And they wanted to engage the MBA students in working on that. So started with tech commercialization and then was drawn into doing leadership instruction because I just feel strongly about the power of great leaders to help us become better versions of ourselves and to become great leaders of our teams.
Love it. It sounds like you've got a couple themes in your professional life and your career. One is technology obviously has the ability to impact a lot of people at scale, right?
Right.
And so too does the training of people and
Yeah.
educating of people. And the more leaders that you can help guide and shape, the bigger your impact, at least indirectly. It's pretty interesting. Yeah.
Thanks.
And also, I'm also curious. So after you left WTIA, paint us a little bit of context around timing. Like, what was the state of the tech sector in Washington at that time, and what would you say is kind of your biggest accomplishment when you left?
Oh, well, that's a good question. The state of the industry was still, was strong. The industry was growing as it has. I think there was a stronger role for companies like Amazon and the laboratories of some of the biggest players like Facebook and others
Mhm.
setting up in Puget Sound. So the industry became more heavily concentrated in some larger players, but obviously there were still thousands of smaller players. I I think that the biggest contribution I might have made was to have us move from being viewed as a software association, which was the history of who we were, to being a tech association. So we merged the Washington branch of the American Electronics Association into us. We rebranded as a tech association. We basically said, we're not the software association of the 80s and 90s. We're now hopefully embracing anyone who's in tech more broadly.
Nice. Yeah, there's definitely some strong parallels there with with our origin story at TAO as well.
Yeah, it seems like it seems like we're brothers here. The 2 states are brothers in a lot of ways in terms of, how our tech sectors grew and evolved.
That's so true. What without the benefit of hindsight, and now in your current role, as you look at Oregon, what one piece of advice or area would you have us focus on as you look at
Oh,
kind of where
oh,
our innovation ecosystem is and could go?
I have to be very honest, Skip, I am not competent to answer that question. I really I'm not being, you know, it's not humility speaking, it's lack of competence. I don't think I think you've honestly, you're in the position to know that. I'm learning, honestly, about the industry, and so I hope I look back a year or 2 from now and we have this conversation about what I might have picked up. I maybe have an idea or 2, but at this point, I'm in learning mode.
Nice. Well, I appreciate that, and also the humility. It's very very Pacific Northwest of you.
It's honest.
Yes. So, shifting a little bit, would love to chat a bit about Alltech. So, you serve as a trustee, and I'm wondering
Yes,
if you could explain a little bit about what Alltech is,
sure.
and also how it's structured. And then, like, why should, say, a tech startup or a growth stage tech company really pay close attention to something like Alltech?
Okay, sure. Well, as a little bit of backdrop for the listeners, they may not know that in the United States, there's probably a dozen to maybe close to 20 states where the state has endorsed what can be done in all 50 states, which is to allow the grouping together of companies that are in the same industry to form a nonprofit health trust. So essentially, we are a collective. We are the collective of TAO's membership and potential memberships banding together to offer health insurance to the members. It's a unique construct in the United States. Not every state has it. Oregon has it, and Oregon has other nonprofit health trusts for other industries, for like lumber industry and others. And we're now, for about a dozen years, we've been operating Alltech in Washington, and we're now bringing it to Oregon, but Oregon's always had the capability to do this. And so essentially what it is we the trust is a construct. At the table is me as a trustee who's primarily a fiduciary. My responsibility is to make sure we run this financially responsible, ethically. And at the virtual table is the different participants. Like in this case, our healthcare medical plan is from MODA. Our vision services plan is our vision plan, and Delta Dental and the standard. There's the different carriers that are there. And then we partner with you at the table, and we have the broker network, the folks that companies would call up to get information or get a bid for Alltech services. And why would anyone care about it? What's different about this? It is essentially a new and different option for a young tech company. If you're a small tech company, and this is generally designed for 2 employees to 50 people, this is a new way to go get a pricing on health insurance for your team, and it is treated differently by the carriers than the other markets that they price. You're basically looking at the collective purchase power of this community. And so what we put together is about a dozen different medical plans that companies can choose from. There's a vision plan and a dental plan and disability and life insurance. And the difference here is that you have a combination of good things. One, you can leverage the buying power of the community. Secondly, we've got very good providers, MODA and VSP and Delta Dental, so high quality. We got so in their provider network, so we got good physician coverage. And then I think the other thing that I personally think is important to Northwest folks is when you pick up the phone and call customer service, who are you talking to? And our customer service is in Spokane, and it's a great group of people over at Associated Industries. And so you'll talk to a human and they'll take care of all the enrollment with you. We have a portal that the employer can use to add or change their coverage. And so I think that's what you get. You get group purchasing power, you get a nice quality network of providers and really solid, reputable carriers. And if you pick up the phone, you'll talk to a human.
Excellent. So I think you've done a great job kind of describing what it is and also, how it could be differentiated from some of the other sort of offerings out there. And the 2 to 50 person company kind of range, as it were, is also helpful. When do you see most companies taking a look at something like a healthcare trust?
That's a good
Is
question.
and it's because you've been doing this, a dozen or so years, and I'm wondering what are some of the trends you're seeing in terms of the market, at least in Washington State, that could be instructive as companies here start to take a look.
Well, generally, when a company, a startup, it hits the point that either it is getting serious, some professional investment, either a substantial angel raise or a venture raise, or they have got enough recurring revenue that they are saying to themselves, we want to offer health insurance to our team. It's not that a very young, 5-person company might do health insurance, and that's why everybody should check us out. But generally, what you find, Skip, is that people who have either got a good sustaining, a revenue engine that's moving, or they've gotten their first venture round, is when they will step up and say, we're going to go get coverage for our team.
Mhm.
And so that's generally when you see it. But if people are able to, we try to get these plans. The plans are varied. Some of them are what are called richer plans, means the benefits are quite rich and the deductibles are lower. Others are high deductible, still good coverage, but a higher deductible means that you pay less per month. And so that's why I encourage people to just check it out. They may say to themselves, "Oh, I can afford a high deductible plan because the monthly rate per person is reasonable, and I'll get it earlier than I expected." I hope that does that tend to did that answer your question in terms of when?
It does. And, earlier we were talking a little bit about how demographically, back in the early days of WTIA, when the merger happened between American Electronics Association on the one hand and, WTIA, which was more focused on software historically. You know, I think too about different types of technology companies, right? So if anything, since then, the definition of a technology company has only grown even more broad, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
so what demographically, I was wondering if you could break down like what are some of the things that you're seeing in terms of companies that typically take advantage of a plan like this within the tech sector broadly defined? What do those types of companies look like? What's the preponderance? And then around the edges, I was wondering if you could describe some of the companies that might be kind of surprising, if there are any, that also have taken advantage of this that people might not intuitively think would be the right fit.
That's a really good question. Well, as you just said, because it's so broad, the kinds of companies who join this trust is very varied. It's gaming companies, it's software companies, it's SaaS companies, it's life sciences company, which is maybe a device plus software. So it's a wireless startup. So it is across the board. In terms of an unusual one, I don't know if this is so unusual, but if a company is just doing data processing services for someone, or is a media company,
Mhm.
they might very much play in the trust. They might be sufficiently tech to make it in the trust. What usually happens, honestly, is that the industry code that the company is attached to is usually what the carriers would look at to determine if they consider it tech or non-tech. And the trust doesn't price. So we are not a we don't have visibility to who is, the proposals that are going forward. The carrier really decides what they want to cover, and it can be quite broad.
So, in terms of some of the tech companies that have become a little more like sort of, shall we say, a hybrid of or a mashup of kind of a couple of traditional companies that were adequately described by the existing industry classification codes. There's definitely some that, either span a couple or not so easily
Okay.
defined. Has that posed any sort of an issue that you've seen given the evolving nature and quick speed at which tech changes in terms of how to characterize certain companies, or is that largely not an issue?
That has not been an issue, but it's a good question, Skip, because I do think where people have not ever thought about what kind of code they are, maybe they thought about that when they formed the company a couple years ago and they just picked one.
Mhm.
They might want to look at where they are today in terms of how they are characterizing themselves as in terms of people are familiar with the National Standardry Industry Code, NSIC. It's probably not a bad idea to look at that again because, at least for the purposes of eligibility for something like this health trust,
Yep.
but it hasn't presented a problem. There are situations where the carrier will say, "Huh, based on how they have presented themselves to us, we don't see this as tech." So
Mhm.
if somebody is gonna go forward and they they haven't thought about it, they might just wanna double check how they are characterized.
Yep. That's great. And then also for companies that, might be a little bit more distributed, right? That have offices and people in multiple states.
Yes.
Like, does that present any sort of a challenge or issue with this? How is a company that's a little bit more distributed treated for purposes of the
Oh,
trust?
it's not as long as the headquarters are in Oregon, it's
Mhm.
not treated any differently.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
These are just some of the typical questions I get
Sure.
with
Yeah.
companies over the years across
Yeah.
some of the various benefits that we've offered. Yeah, an evolving space, shall we say, the technology industry. It keeps a lot of labor economists and other folks on their toes, and I can't tell you
Uh-huh.
the number of conversations just on our workforce initiatives over the years where it's been,
Yep.
oh, this industry classification code has been outdated for the last 5 years, and no one seems to be, you know, ready to
Yeah.
update or create a new one for this new category of company. So, um,
Uh-huh. I
yeah,
I
it's
I completely believe that. It's
yes,
ahead of the classification system.
yep, totally. So that was definitely very helpful in terms of an overview. And
Yeah.
as you look at the Oregon market, are you also looking at other states from an expansion standpoint? Like what do growth plans look like for Alltech?
At this point, we're focused on, I mean, this is enough to bite off, honestly. This is we wanna do this well. We don't
Mhm.
have any growth plans at this point other than to be the Northwest, focus Oregon and Washington.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And in terms of some of what you're looking at when it comes to the relationship with Tao, what are some things that have been really helpful in terms of your partners in Washington State that we might want to try and emulate?
I think you are already a leader in terms of the offerings that you have for the the people and the companies in Oregon. I think that we are here to help you in terms of adding to your offerings for member benefits. So we're going to take, I think, the lead from what your members are telling us they need.
Mhm.
So we're coming in now and we're saying, here's a set of offerings. I am personally very interested in having them tell us, yeah, these look great, but we really would prefer a different kind of offering. I think we're a service provider. We're a nonprofit. We're not motivated in the same ways that for profit companies are. So I don't think that's answering your question well, Skip. But
Oh no, it was great.
uh,
I mean, this focus on you know, being close to and listening to the customer's needs,
Yeah.
and being a regional, locally focused entity that's going to double down and offer, you know, is sort of approachable and accessible services as possible. I mean, that all sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
And so if we can be an effective partner and conduit by which you're able to, get connected to companies that have expressed an interest and, have those companies benefit from the carefully curated and responsive service that you all offer, I think that's wonderful. And as we look at, the space, there's obviously a lot going on that's technology driven right now with, the benefits world, right? Like we have a couple member companies, some of which have, headquarters out of state, that are doing stuff around like investment platforms and like 401ks and wealth management and everything else. And it's been interesting to see how smaller companies can, through technology, get access to the information they need to know more about the sort of needs of their existing employees, but then also make it easier for their employees to have that information at their fingertips to make informed decisions about what benefits they're taking advantage of offered by an employer. And you did mention that there is a dashboard, correct? That folks can kind of utilize. So walk me through like how would a company get onboarded and what sort of services would they have access to, once they
Yeah.
get going with all tech?
So you're absolutely right, but if I just want to plus one your comment about how, whether it in healthcare services space or in financial services, so much is going directly to the consumer
Mhm.
to have choice of products, and you're seeing that with startups being able to get an integrated platform for payroll and health benefits and so forth. If in our case, the company just working through the whole process, either coming directly to us or coming to their broker, they would say, "I'd like a quote." And they would give us some information that we would then pass on to the different carriers, and then we would come back with a quote for the coverage. If they say yes, then our service arm comes in place, and the company will have an administrator who will have a dashboard and they'll work with our customer service folks to get everybody onboarded and to do all the billing to a single point of contact. And then as new employees are added to the company or people leave, they would reflect that in the dashboard, or if coverage requests come in, they would do that through the dashboard. And if they prefer to talk to a human, they just pick up the phone and talk to our folks in Spokane.
Excellent. All right. Well, as we think about like space you all are in, what do you listen to? What do you read to keep up on things?
Well, for me, I kind of keep track of where for this trustee role, I obviously try to stay very current with the evolving, rules and regulations about how trusts operate. I'm very interested in how the federal government is going to keep or change the way the health reimbursement system works, and so that's we stay very close to that so that we can adapt. Personally, I'm very interested in how AI is going to impact the way people get leadership advice,
Yep. Excellent.
and just you know, there's so many things we can all think about when it comes to AI, and we're being kind of bombarded with it. For me personally, I'm interested in how it might help people become more effective at leading.
I am as well. And I think if you were to ask most of the folks that we work with too, that's definitely a topic that's top of mind right now.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Yes. And it's funny, like I can't have a conversation these days where AI isn't a part of it in
Yeah.
some way, shape, or form.
Yep. Yep.
And yeah, so as we wrap up our time together, I've really enjoyed our conversation. Are there any sort of final thoughts you'd want to leave our listeners with?
First of all, I really appreciate that you would give us the opportunity to have this conversation, and we're really excited. We're announcing this thing in a couple days,
Mhm.
and I really want to thank your team especially Tim Winter, for all the time he gave and care he gave to this. We've
Mhm.
been working on this for a year. So first of all, thanks for that. I would say that we're here to learn. Oregon isn't Washington. We don't want to. We want to hear what people want and adapt to that. And so we're coming into this market through you, you are our partner. And so we're going to listen to you. We're going to listen to what people tell us works and what doesn't, and then we're going to adapt. So we think it's a privilege to be able to work with such a reputable and long-standing organization as Tao. So we're really excited.
Awesome. Well, we are as well, and looking forward to the partnership. Thanks again for
Thank you,
joining us.
Skip. Thanks for the time.
Thanks for tuning in to Techlandia. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe, share it with your network, and leave us a review. It really helps grow the show. Techlandia is about connecting you to the people, ideas, and innovation shaping our region's tech community. If you want to support the podcast and its mission, check out the links in the show notes. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and keep building what's next.